All right, everybody. Welcome to our fifth webinar. This is brought to you by a number of people, but OrthoMentor. And we have an all-star cast of educators and mentors tonight. So I'm really excited to hear what everyone has to say. I'm Bill Levine from Columbia. I'm going to be the chat master who will be getting your questions to our outstanding faculty from the chat room. So please use the chat room, not the Q&A room if you can. In my upper left corner, we have the incredible Dr. Dawn Laporte. Dr. Laporte's professor. She's the vice chair of education and the residency program director at Johns Hopkins. She's won every award imaginable, including Teacher of the Year. In my right corner, I have Dr. Lauren Gainey. Dr. Gainey is an assistant professor. She's the residency program director at the University of Connecticut. And we're excited to have her here tonight. In the lower left corner, we have Dr. Nicole Schroeder from University of California, San Francisco. She's an associate professor, and she is the associate residency program director, has also won a number of teaching awards, which seems to be ubiquitous amongst this group. In the far right corner, we have Dr. Mac Hogan, longtime friend and vice chair of education, residency program director at the University of Pittsburgh. And then in the middle, we have Dr. Tabs Ayer, one of the three founding members of OrthoMentor and tonight's MC for this fifth webinar on what are programs looking for in this application cycle. Take it away, Tabs.
Thank you, Dr. Levine. And first off, thank you to all of our esteemed faculty, Dr. Laporte, Dr. Hogan, Dr. Schroeder, and Dr. Gainey. I first want to thank all of you who are in attendance, because I think that it really is an honor for us to be able to do what we do in this sort of forum. We know and we recognize that this is very tumultuous times, and to have some semblance of, light, if you will, to kind of break through what may seem very dark is really kind of nice. And it's something that I wish I had when I was in y'all's shoes. To try to alleviate some of the anxiety, we're going to be discussing, and the program directors and Dr. Levine will be shedding some light further on things that you may be thinking about, questions you want to ask, questions that you may be asking in various forums, but not necessarily getting optimal answers from. And these faculty members from their respective institutions are going to be able to give you their take on what it's going to be like when they review the programs in this particular, or review applications this particular cycle. With that in mind, this is sort of one iteration of program director sort of showcasing, if you will. We will continue via OrthoMentor specifically to do Insta Live features of various program directors from around the country. So stay tuned for that. With that in mind, I want to take no more time. I want to actually kick it off to Dr. Hogan from University of Pittsburgh. And I'm going to ask him a question, which I think is probably resonate or really on the mind of a lot of applicants out there. And I'm going to ask him first, because he's actually worked with one of my students here from Miami, and I've heard great things about Dr. Hogan here. So, what facet of the cycle do you think is going to be the most challenging from a program director perspective specifically?
Oh, no, thanks for the question. And I think from our perspective here is really structuring for the unknown, right? So it's essentially, you're doing this in a pandemic. How do you field the number of applications and make sure that you give each student that you really want to give a true vetting and opportunity, that you're still able to provide that in this new format that is different than what we've done in the past. And so I also believe a key component of that is ensuring the ability to engage faculty. In the past, obviously, we have a physical interview and faculty take out time out of their day ahead of time to be there. And that has essentially been hurting the cattle, but also ensuring that you're getting the appropriate feedback from your partners, stakeholders, and again, that the students feel as though they are truly able to engage with us through this process.
I think that's a wonderful response. And do you think, kind of on that same notion, before I kicked off to someone else, do you think that the virtual interviews, which may be one form of the interview completed this year, do you think you'll be able to get the same sort of appreciation for students who you may not have had time to spend with on like a normal away rotation years? Do you think you'll be able to get a sense as to all the different things you're looking for through that virtual rotation or virtual interview in comparison to the physical interview that you've had in years prior?
I think for us, there's going to be a balance. If you look at how, at least in our particular case, we would interview on average 90 to 100 students a year. Rotators would range anywhere on a high year to 25 to 30 rotators, on a lower average year, 15 to 25 rotators. So when you look at that, there were a number of individuals that we really only interacted with them on interview day. That's always been a commonality here at Pitt. And so what I anticipate going forward is we are really pushing to have our faculty engaged in the virtual interview process, as well as the residents. And some faculty have actually mentioned they'll be able to spend more time with the residents during an interview. It's just a matter of the structure and timing. I think for us, we're going to have our interview days posted, but essentially being able to give that opportunity for, we would normally interview in 1.5 days and we would blitz. So that will be scaled a little bit differently this year. Anticipating the virtual impact.
That's a great response, and I want to hear from Dr. Gainey, who I've had the pleasure of knowing for quite some time now, as we trained in the same fellowship once upon a time. And what is sort of the most challenging aspect of the cycle that you're anticipating, kind of from what you're just seeing in general, from what questions students are bringing to you, and what you anticipate may be occurring over at UConn specifically?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say there are two things I'm worried about. The first, from our perspective, is, we're trying to find a way to showcase what we have to offer. And I think by not having the students, there's that interaction between the residents and the students that happens between interviews. There's the tour, which, you could argue the tour itself, every hospital has a call room and every, hospital has this. But I think something that we find really special is the camaraderie between the residents. And I worry about how to showcase that and how to showcase our program to potential students. So from that perspective, that's something that we're trying hard to beef up our website and try to provide that. The other thing that I worry about is the number of applications and the shortened cycle. So while match day is going to still be the same day, what's happening is that we're going to get our applications later. And so what I've always done and what, we try very hard is that we don't really have a cutoff, and I try hard to go through all these applications so that we don't miss somebody. But now if I have, only 3 weeks to do what I used to do in 6 weeks, and now people are applying to more places because everyone's concerned, then I worry that it's going to impact my ability to really have a holistic and a broader view of all those applicants.
And you raise a really good point. I want to ask, and I'm going to swing this to Dr. Schroeder, that, at least at UCSF and in general, like what advice specifically with regards to Dr. Gainey's point about, hey, students theoretically applying to lots of different places. Are y'all discussing with your students in particular, and do you have recommendations regarding application caps, even dual applying, having active backup plans, even if the students have pretty stellar and competitive, competitive applications?
Yeah, I'm not advising my students really any differently in terms of applying this year that I would have last year, in terms of like talking about scores, talking about rotations, talking about what they're doing. I mean, I think it's the same as it was before. Certainly a lot of stuff is very different, but the only change that they have is, unfortunately, that the students don't have the opportunity to go out and look at these programs that they might be really interested in. And so what I tell my students is, the onus really ends up being on you to research the programs that you might have been interested in going to because you heard from word of mouth from, another student that you worked with or somebody who's a resident there. Now you're going to go online and you're going to attend the conferences that these programs are offering. And the goal is still the same. It's to make sure that your goals align with the program's goals, and that's where we want everyone to end up. And so that's what I'm telling my students. It's not to think about, applying to another residency or thinking about a backup.
Tabs,
yes.
Can I highlight Dr. Schroeder's point to
Sure.
just amplify that a little bit? I think this is a key point, and I know students have been asking me and asking you guys from around the country. Applying to more programs will not work. It will not help you. Statistically, it has never helped you. And I'm going to share something with you. Here's a little secret. It will hurt you, and it will hurt your classmates from the same program. If Dr. Hogan has 15 Pittsburgh students and they all apply to 90 programs, they are absolutely hosing each other because they're going to cancel each other out. Dr. Hogan needs to help his 15 students go to a different, unique set of programs, apply to a different, unique set of programs, so that some of the lower tier Pittsburgh students aren't being eaten alive by the top tier Pittsburgh students. But if you all apply to the same, then you actually cancel that out. So you're going to hurt yourself, and right now you're only interested in your match, and you're also going to hurt your co-students, same school students. So really important point.
And I would just echo this, and I'm going to follow Dr. Schroeder's comment in a second, but this is really where having open dialogue with your faculty at your home program, or with faculty even locally, if you don't have a home program, is particularly important to kind of get and buy-in on either end of the spectrum, both from faculty and students, is really important to best understand your relative competitiveness and what you can do to optimize your chances. So going to the notion of, virtual offerings, and I have lots of students who have been asking me about this, whether we have it here in Miami or elsewhere. What can students do, Dr. Schroeder, for programs where there isn't a virtual offering, what can they do, or what can you suggest that they do to demonstrate their interest in that particular program? What are you advising in that regard?
That's a great question, Tabs, because I think that's a really hard thing to do. So at UCSF, we have a lot of virtual offerings, but we've made it a point to not be collecting people that are signing in or signing up for these, because it's, in my opinion, I don't think it's fair if you're on the East Coast and we're on the West Coast and you can't sign in because you might be doing another rotation so there are a lot of people who might be interested, but just don't have the opportunity to do it. And so what I've been telling the students that have emailed me saying, hey, I'm really interested. Some of them, we do have research opportunities that I've been able to link some students up with some of our faculty who have research projects going on. But I've really been advising them that it's important to kind of keep in contact with us, and also to really look in depth at kind of what our faculty is doing, reach out to our residents. We have some resident webinars or Zoom information so that they can meet varying residents of all ages, of all backgrounds, so that they have an opportunity to do that. And then as a one-off, if they have other questions, and we're happy to give our resident emails out to anybody who's interested.
That's a great point. So Dr. Laporte, at Hopkins, for those students who are interested in a given program where there isn't a virtual offering, what sort of things are you suggesting that students do in order to engage further and demonstrate interest in that particular institution?
Thanks. So we're encouraging our students to pick their 3 programs that they were interested in, maybe that they were going to do a WAYS at, and then to reach out to those programs. And if they don't have virtual opportunities, to engage either with the program director or with residents there or faculty members. If we have an alum from Hopkins who is on faculty there or who's done residency there, that's a great way to make that contact, or to have their faculty mentor reach out on their behalf. So not doing it to 10 or 20 programs, but picking a select number of programs and reaching out. And I think, the same way, I think most program directors or coordinators or residents are very happy to speak with applicants and tell them about their program and connect them with others. And that's a nice way to show interest and to learn about the program.
Yeah, and what I think you hit the nail on the head there. And one thing that I've been suggesting to students is you can always reach out to the residency coordinator. I wouldn't, they tend to be the gatekeepers a lot of times for many programs, and make nice with them. And many times there is and at least in Miami, there's a designated resident who is sort of the person that you'll be able to contact and ask about the program. And that may be a very, a nondescript sort of low cost kind of way of finding out a little bit more. The other thing is, and as many of, as you may have seen in the Twitterverse or Instagram or whatever, However, there's lots of programs now bolstering social media pages. And this is a great, and many times run by residents, maybe run by some faculty, combination of both. But this is another way to, ping them and get a response with regards to what kinds of things are you seeing, or what kinds of things you want to know about that program in particular. So Dr. Lepore, I'm going to ask you kind of a question I know is probably burning the ears of a lot of our students. So what things can they do right now? It's July, I think 13th. ERAS is going to be due in about just over 3 months. What kinds of things can they do to bolster or boost their chances of matching in this particular cycle, and things you would suggest the students sort of look out to be doing right this second, and going forward up until ERAS is submitted?
So good question. I think, at this point, most of your clerkships are done. And so you're not changing your grades. You're not going to make a huge dent in research at this point, although finishing up any projects that you have is good advice. What we're telling the students, I think it's really important to engage in your home program. Everybody should be able to do 2 sub-Is at their program if they have it, or 2 sub-Is nearby if you don't have orthopedics. 1, so that you can learn some orthopedics, but 2, to get to know your faculty members who are going to be your letter writers. I think letters of recommendation are going to be very important in this cycle. So you want your letter writers to really know who you are and be able to write a letter saying what's unique about you and why you're so great. And I would also put a fair amount of effort into the personal statement and make sure somebody takes a look at that. You don't want your personal statement to say that you want to go into orthopedics because you tore your ACL. That's unfortunate, but that happens to, that's not what you want your personal statement to say. So you want it to reflect something unique and telling about you. And I would let your faculty members help you with that. So putting effort into your letters and your personal statement, which I think may be weighed more heavily this cycle. And then also, as we were just talking about, making connections. So networking, either reaching out on your own behalf, but also letting your mentors reach out on your behalf to that handful of programs that you think you're really interested in, and reaching out to alumni contacts through your program. I think that now is a really good time for that. You want to do that before somebody's deciding if they're going to interview you or not.
Those are all.
Tabs.
Oh, yes.
There's the elephant in the room. There's a big elephant in the chat room.
Okay.
And they're saying Levine is full of crap. How can we trust these students to only apply to a certain number? And it's going to be prisoner's dilemma, and everybody's going to apply to 80 programs. They are correctly referencing the AOA cord recommendation of 40 or 60 capped, but then there's a question of enforceability, et cetera. So we might as well deal with this right now. Head on, Tabs. Take it on.
Okay. So for those who, some people know, some people don't, but I probably deal with a lot of the advising here at UM. And so if a kid decides to do orthopedics, they somehow end up with me. And I currently have 18 students that are applying orthopedics. So, all the residents say, oh, it's like almost like a Georgetown or a Jeff, kind of year. And I say, yeah, what a year to have that. What I have been really active about is trying to, at least because I need to make sure that as many of the 18 match as much as possible. And in order to do that, I have to be very honest about their relative level of competitiveness. So the thing is, when deans at various institutions, and I'm very close, the deans call me all the time with regards to the students who are applying orthopedics. I think it's sometimes people just say cast a wide net. But the reality is, as Dr. Levine was saying earlier, if you have a lot of kids, like in our class or at UM, the kids at the top who apply to 100 programs may inadvertently be hosing the people down that are maybe towards the bottom of the 18. And so this is where the true sort of decision-making strategic decision-making with regards to the competitiveness of the application, the strengths and weaknesses, things you can do to actually improve the application becomes that much more critical, because the people you're competing against the most are probably the students at your school, because no program is going to interview all 18. I mean, maybe some of you all will, but even though I have 18 great kids, the reality is that we have to be strategic about who is applying where in order to minimize the competitive edge that one student might have over another.
So Tabs, let's do a real life example. Dr.
Yes.
Laporte, You have let's say all 18 U of M students applied to Hopkins this year. What's the maximum number you think you would interview from University of Miami? Be honest, give a number.
Certainly not more than 4 or 5.
Okay, Dr. Schroeder.
I'd say probably between 3 and 5.
3 and 5. Dr. Gainey.
2 to 3.
There's the first honest answer. Thank you. Mac.
Yeah, I would invite 4 to 5 because my wife is from Miami, and then Freddie would tell me, "Why didn't you only pick 3?" He's like,
so listen, this is real life, students out there. This is the real life. That's what we're trying to share with you. And I get it. I get that not all of you have people in your corner that can say, hey, you're number 13 out of 15, but you got to push your school. You got to push your mentors. This is the year you got to push them. And if they won't do it, send your information to Tabs, send it to me, send it to any of us. We look at it. We've looked at thousands of applications. We can tell you how competitive or not competitive you are. Since we started these webinars, I've probably reviewed 300 applications, and we're happy to share our thoughts with you.
This is in part, and I just want to echo one thing on exactly that note. So after every webinar, Dr. Levine we'll talk to some students. He and I will both talk to some of the same students. The reality is that if you don't, even someone just mentioned, if you don't have a home program, then reach out. I mean, I'm constantly on my phone. I respond within literally 5 minutes of an email or a message of some sort. And it probably like upsets my wife to some extent. But the reality is that if you do not reach out, you are doing yourself a disservice, because there are people who are willing to at least talk to you. And that discussion and that dialogue is particularly important, especially as Dr. Laporte said, the networking piece is so important this cycle around. So at least getting perspective from people around you, people locally, residents around you. And if you don't have a home program, myself, Dr. Lee, and anyone here, I think is particularly helpful this time around for sure.
Can I make a comment on something that you hit on? This is the year, as Dr. Levine and Tab are mentioning, push your mentors, build your relationships, push those relationships. But it's also the year where, you know what, nothing can be unturned. So I interview and talk to a number of students, like all of us do. And I know all the PDs have the student who says, you know, I'm from Texas, but I really don't want to go back to Texas. So I'm just going to really not focus on that area. You know what? This is not the year for your desire not to end up back in your hometown to have any impact on your decision making. You really need to look at the list of places that you are thinking about applying to. And I agree with everything that's been said. I tell students every year, give me 3 tiers, a third, pick anywhere from anything divisible by 3. I try 30, the students laugh at me. And then I say, okay, go 60, and they say, still not enough. Then I say, okay, go 75 programs when I'm angry and I want to get them out of my office. But I really want them to focus on 30 to 40 programs every year consistently. And this is the year to really do that. And use where you're from, where your relationships may tie back to, roots you may have in places that have been unturned for a decade. But those are the connections that many programs will be looking to this year beyond the number, beyond the application. Like, okay, why would this person come here? And so I would strongly consider taking a close look at that list as being reinforced here.
Dr. Gainey, lots of questions about step 2. You know, they've been canceled. We know that the CS has been canceled, eliminated, and CK has been, postponed a bunch of different times. How important is step 2 going to be at UConn this year?
In general, we don't look too highly at scores. The way that we do it is I tend to, take all the applications, I put a filter on in order to make it a reasonable number for my faculty to review. But then I look at the throwaways, people that we would have missed, and I always try to find 2 or 3 people in there that I think are exceptional that for whatever reason we would have missed. And so, things I'm looking for in particular, the step 2 matters more to me if somebody did poorly on step 1 to show that they improved. If there's a big discrepancy between the 2, that gets me, that raises some questions for me. But if it's consistent and everything else looks good, I don't look too much at it.
Dr. Schroeder, can I ask Dr. Schroeder a question? Dr.
Sure.
Schroeder, there's a couple of questions about, there's all these rumors out there that all of these programs, especially if you have 5 or 6 students, or in Tab's case, 18, why not just call it a day and take 6 of his own students and not worry about the rest of the country. Why not just do that, Dr. Schroeder?
Well, I won't answer for tabs on that one, but I'll tell you that, when we're going through the applications, we are looking for the best people out there that will get the best out of our program, right? We want the people who feel like our program offers them everything that will make them the best orthopedist and a leader in, orthopedics. And so sometimes that is our own, and we've kept many of our own in varying years, and there are outstanding students, so we are very happy to have them. But at the same time, everybody on this phone is incredibly qualified, and that should be the first thing that you guys should be thinking about, is just how qualified you all are and how far you've made it, and applaud yourself. But when we look through these applications, I would guarantee that probably all of us sitting here feel that we would have never gotten to orthopedics today if we were applying now. You guys are incredible applicants, but so some of them are our own, but we really want people that want to be at this program, and for the right reasons. They feel like it's a good place for them to continue their education and to further their knowledge of orthopedics and learn how to be good physicians and surgeons.
From my perspective, at least, and I want to throw a question around that I think is another elephant in the room. It really does depend, just as Dr. Schroeder is saying, is where do you think you're going to flourish? And identifying the characteristics of a program that mesh the most well with you, even though the match is the match, and there's obviously some degree of, you can't control it completely. When you are at least applying, and especially if you're applying in the context of the strength of your application, you can think about programs that you believe that you can flourish in. The way to kind of glean that sort of information is not necessarily from websites, but it's talking to the interns that just started at the program that you're at. It's reaching out to interns via Twitter, via Instagram that are just starting right now. It's talking to the residency coordinator at an institution you're interested in, linked you up with. Those are the types of things you can start gleaning in terms of hey, what's the mentoring like? What's the research component like? What's the operative autonomy like? What's all these different things that we think about, that we throw out there when we're thinking about the types of programs we want to go to. That's in part of the important mental exercise to actually start narrowing down and cultivating that list of whether it's 30, 40, 50, or whatever number it ends up being that you apply to. Hopefully it's not some ridiculously high number, at least in my case. But that is what I'm telling every student. Now, one thing I do want to ask, I want to go around the room and just see, because Dr. Laporte brought up a good question. Pre-COVID years, how much emphasis did y'all place on the personal statement? A lot of emphasis or minimal emphasis? Show of hands. A lot of emphasis, show of hands. Okay. Post-COVID or intra-COVID, how much emphasis do you think you will place on the personal statement this time around?
I think there'll be more.
More. Okay. So I think that's just the personal statement is still something to take seriously. And I think it's an important point of it can showcase some of the things that you may have wanted to show at your during an away rotation that you may not be able to do now, and may not be able to do during a virtual offering, but I think it's an important point. The question I want to throw to Dr. Hogan that I think is really the elephant in the room is, what types of things are you looking for in your applicants? You're going through the list of 1,000 that are coming through, you and your committee. What sort of things tend to be looked upon most favorably at Pitt?
I would say it's variable. I always use this. I like a dynamic individual. It doesn't mean you have to be loud, doesn't mean you have to be involved in 25 different things, but what about you? And dynamic can just mean, for me, it's something interesting or something I did not expect. So I'll give my rundown of what I do. I pull out every application. I look to see where people were born, only because I'm from a small hometown now in North Alabama. So one year we had 100 applicants. I found 2 students who were born in the same city or town in Iowa 3 years apart. And they were like, this is weird. And I actually made them meet each other, and so I look for things like that. And then I look at your hobbies. I look at the first paragraph of your personal statement. And then I take a glance at your experiences. And usually, and then we have a column with the scores where, again, like many program directors, a soft cutoff so that I can make it, digestible for the faculty. But then I do the same thing. I actually go back and look at all the ones that would have fallen out of that to make sure there's not a diamond in the rough. And so have a consistency about, what you're trying to achieve in life, and so I will ask someone, they may have a personal statement that's good, but if it's lukewarm, one thing that I would always do, I would say, well, why didn't you write about this hobby that you have, fishing? And they would say, what? And I'm like, well, everybody tears their ACL. As Dr. Laporte said, you probably could have, I probably would have enjoyed you talking about bass fishing or something. You never know. I mean, so that's me. Everyone's a little different, and that's why we have a committee. But you really want to be able to tell a story. And it really comes, this is the generation of the elevator pitch, right? So if all you have are a few moments in time, how are you going to get your point across for someone to pay attention to you a little bit longer for the right reasons? And so that's what I look for.
Hey guys, do anybody on this panel use a filter for step 1 scores below which you will not review their application?
So,
Dr. Schroeder, thank you.
yeah. So for UCSF, we don't have like a standard yearly filter that we use, but we typically, once we get the number of applications that we have, which are obviously several hundred more than, positions that we can offer, our filter usually vacillates every year, but we really only filter out about the bottom 5% of scores. So I can't tell you it's like a 230 or a 240 this year, but it is usually somewhere around that number. And it just really depends on the number of applications that we get and the scores that we get, but that's it.
Dr. Laporte.
We have what I would say is a soft filter. So we use a number so that my general faculty only look at scores above a certain level, that myself and my associate program director and our chairman look at all of the other applications. So like Dr. Gainey mentioned, so we don't miss anyone who's outstanding who had a bad day. So everyone gets a look.
Dr. Hogan?
Same as Dr. Laporte just mentioned. And we've matched students in a range of, since I've been here, of 215 all the way to 275, 280, and trying to understand how they know that much. So that's our range.
You know what Scott Porter would say about 270 and 280.
Hey man, he's in the South, like where I grew up. Just give me a 215 and someone who can use a drill, and I can make him an orthopedic surgeon.
Tabs.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know.
U of M have a filter?
I don't know for a fact that they do. I know in previous years, like within 5 to 10 years, it's been close to 250 for non-rotators. But I don't know if that's changed. I think that's changed in the last several years, but I don't know what the exact filter is offhand. The one thing I wanted to chime in is that the fact that you, especially for the students, the fact that you hear such a spectrum of scores tells you that it's not just about the score. It is really about the entire application. And your basket weaving adventure, in wherever it may have been, as long as it has been done with a calculated frame of reference of how it relates to your interest in orthopedics and what you aspire to do with said acquired skill sets, all those things, just as Dr. Hogan said, you need to be able to sell yourself. And what all these different things, all these different things that are on your application, how they relate to your interest in orthopedics. But committees don't always know that. So you need to be able to tell that story. You need to be able to tell that story very eloquently to the program directors, to the selection committees who are looking at someone who they've never necessarily met before. So you have to make that extremely clear. I think one other thing that, and I just want to ask the group as a whole is, one of the reasons why STEP scores have been used is because you got to imagine there's Dr. Hogan, Dr. Schroeder, Dr. Gainey, Dr. Laporte are saying, Dr. Levine and company are sitting there with thousands of applications. That's a lot of paper, whether it's on the computer or physically. So you got to figure that there has to be a way, maybe not necessarily the best way, but a way to help narrow that down, narrow the field. And that's perhaps why, at least in the past, it has been used or focused on. But again, just as they're saying, step one, step two, whatever, that's not the end all be all. And I think I really want to personally highlight that to everyone out there who's asking, oh, if I don't get this score, like, will I not match? But that's what I have to say about that. So Dr. Laporte, tell me what sort of things that you look for. And I know we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on the Insta Live, but tell me what kinds of things that you look for specifically with regards to, kind of residency applications, and what kinds of things you have seen on the applications correlate with residency performance, especially over the last, few years that you've seen, you've been reviewing applications and seeing those applicants turn to residents.
Sure. So we do look for a good solid record of performance, and not looking at step scores for that, because anyone can have an off day, but looking for consistently high performance on clerkships, because I think that does correlate with consistently good performance as a resident. So you can perform even when you're not loving your whatever psych rotation or some other rotation that you're doing, you can perform consistently. But more, once you're past that, we really look for somebody who would be a great partner, somebody who you would be happy to be up with in the middle of the night, somebody who works well with others, and can be a good team player. And that's the kind of person, I guess, that I think will thrive in a program like what we have. And so, what would we look for in an application? Maybe an indication of that kind of character and sustained commitment in their personal statement or in their letters of recommendation. We'd love to get a great letter of recommendation from somebody we know and respect, who, says that this person is going to be a great resident, and, why they're going to succeed in a program like that. Other things that can show that sustained commitment would be, maybe performing as on a high level athletics or music or dance, or getting a black belt, or being an Eagle Scout. So we, look for kind of hints in the application of, somebody being passionate about something and following it through, and just being a good person. So that's hard. It's easier to figure out when they're on and away for a month, or when we have in-person interviews. So that's why I think the letters and the personal statement and any engagement beforehand can help with that this year.
That's awesome. And, I think I want to ask, and Dr. Gainey, what sort of things about the applications, or why do students not get an interview at UConn? What kinds of things that say kind of detract you from, offering an interview to a student?
So, to the point of what we've been talking about applying to a lot of places. So the first thing I look for is to figure out why somebody would want to come to UConn. So what I'm looking for is some connection. Maybe they did a rotation close by. Maybe they grew up, like Dr. Hogan said, maybe they grew up close by. Maybe they went to college around here. So I'm trying to find, to the point that of the 800 applications that we see, probably 95% of them are great residents, right? So I don't need the number one person from Stanford if they grew up in California, they went to Stanford, they've done all Ivy Leagues. I'm left with, well, why would they want to come to UConn? So I'm trying to find a place that, somebody that I think, is really interested, and that's my challenge. And maybe that's something we're going to talk about showing interest, but that's one of the first things I look for, somebody who I think is truly interested. And unfortunately, sometimes you're inferring something and, you may or may not be fair. And then, I think that as much as you can, I don't necessarily think research is hugely important, but the thing that I think is important about research is that it shows that you can multitask, which is all of what residency is. If you can be productive, even if it's not an orthopedic paper, but you can put out a paper and you can be primary author, and even if it's just one, but you're primary author and you got honors and you did well in your steps, then you've shown me that you can do lots of things at once and be successful at it. And I think that's the best indicator of a good resident, at least, something that I can see on paper.
Dr. Schroeder, same question, sort of factors.
Tabs, can I just say one thing?
Yeah, go for it.
I read all 800 applications, and it's actually become, I've been doing it for a lot longer than any of you guys. So it's actually pretty easy to do. And I think Dr. Gainey hit it on the head. If I am looking at an applicant from Hawaii who went to Stanford undergrad, he's at Hawaii Medical School, and he or she did 3 away rotations at Hawaii, UC San Francisco, and UC Irvine in the old days when we knew that. There's absolutely zero likelihood of that person's coming to New York City. And that review took about 3 seconds of my time. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful. I just mean that with 800 applications, we are looking for a hook. And I don't personally look at it and say, oh, if you didn't rotate at Columbia, then I'm going to be a snob about it and you then not consider you. If you did a rotation at Sinai or at HSS or NYU or Lenox Hill or somewhere in the Northeast, then I look at that and I think that's a competitive applicant. And that's somebody that we absolutely would consider because they've shown some interest in the Northeast. So how does that translate this year? If you've got 3 places that you knew you were going to rotate at and you're honest about it and you say, hey, Dr. Hogan, I know you're at Pittsburgh. I was really interested in somewhere in Pennsylvania. I was going to a couple different places. I have an aunt who lives outside of Pittsburgh, and I've got some geographic reasons. That's okay to make it personal this year. So there's a lot of questions coming up in the Q&A, guys, about the personal statements and how personal should you make your personal statement. My bias, without question, is it better be personal this year.
Yeah.
And if you can't make your personal statement personal about why you think, as you just heard, Dr. Gainey's going, why in God's name is this person coming to UConn? There's just nothing that reads UConn about this person. And you need to let Dr. Gainey know, yeah, there is a reason. I've got a third cousin who's a nurse at UConn and we're really close family, whatever it might be. Sorry, Tabs, thanks.
No. And for those who are on the struggle bus, and I've talked to many students who are, I have a very simple template that I can email you. I put it on the Instagram page recently that is super easy to use, super easy to just kind of flows really well. I designed it when I was like an intern and it came out of my own experience with it, but I'm happy to give it to you if you're still on the struggle bus for the personal statement. But yes, I do think it needs, I personally read every single one of them when I'm reviewing applications. And I think it's helpful to get a little bit more insight into you as a person. But Dr. Schroeder, I wanted to ask you, so what sort of things cause students to not get an interview at UCSF versus those who do garner one?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of factors, kind of I'll just reiterate what everyone has said about the connection. But another thing is read, double read, have multiple people proofread your applications, because, one of the biggest pet peeves is when things are misspelled or they're just poorly done. I think that's a big emphasis to probably everybody sitting here is like, this is your life and your next 5 to 6 years. So you should spend a lot of time really making sure that you have all the information on there correct and that your grammar is correct and appropriate. So that's just one thing. And then, the things that probably that I can easily say that don't get people interviews is anybody that's rude to our staff, right? So we have, a lot of communication with our program coordinators. And if anybody has been rude to them or has, done anything in that manner, that's certainly something that is not going to get you an interview at our program. And then it's really trying to figure out when we read the personal statements, when we look at all of the extracurriculars that you've done, is do we feel that, your ideals align with ours, right? And so at our program, we have a lot of faculty interviews. So anybody who's interested in interviewing does interviews. We have multiple rooms, multiple members of faculty in every room, and every single person that does our interviews has to read those applications before they're allowed to interview. And they have to show us that they've read them by ranking people, just so that we know that they've done it. And we have kept it so that there's no universal ranking system. Everybody has their own system that they can use, but really kind of factoring in those values. We have people that are looking at leadership and what kind of leadership score can we give people? What's their research? How does that align with UCSF's research interests and their research activities? And then what have they done in the setting of diversity? And what have they done to kind of lead their medical school, or was it in college, or, what have they done throughout their career to show that they could really be a leader?
Those are all amazing comments, and good to know specifically what's being done over there. Dr. Levine.
Lots of questions about DO applicants. We have covered this in previous webinars, but worth mentioning again. I will just say one thing. My lovely, wonderful daughter, Sonia, will be starting at the Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine in a month. So obviously, big fan of DO schools. But obviously, it's a concern that people raise. Tabs, talk a little bit, Tabs, about the new accreditation pathway, since
Sure.
we've co-authored an article on that.
Yeah, so for those who did not know, this past year, the ACGME and the American Osteopathic Association, the other AOA, the third AOA, I guess, merged such that the match, all specialties, so the allopathic and osteopathic match fall under one umbrella sort of process. So pretty much MD and DO students are competing for the same spots, if you will. So unless DO programs met their accreditation, and many have, out of, especially in orthopedics, the 40-some programs, majority of which have at least achieved initial accreditation or continued accreditation, it means that is potentially in the sort of same pool of what you can apply for. Whether the DO programs will take MD applicants is sort of TBD, still being determined. I know of at least one predominantly DO program, I think in Jersey, that took an MD applicant this past cycle. And that is something to sort of be aware of as y'all are kind of moving forward. The question I actually wanted to ask, and I'll ask everyone now, is are you or have you matched osteopathic students, and are you going to, and will you continue doing so, or are you going to review osteopathic students moving forward if you haven't in the past? Dr. Laporte?
I'm muting. So we have always been open to interviewing DO students. We, for transparency, have never had a DO resident. We've had DO fellows, and we've had a DO research applicants, one of whom would have probably matched this year, but took a spot at PCOM because it opened up. Yes, we are open to and interviewing DO applicants, but we have not had a resident here before.
Dr. Hogan?
Yes, we've, again, transparent, we've never had a DO resident here at Pitt. We do have a number of DO faculty, and we've had DO fellows, as Dr. Laporte mentioned. For us, the UPMC, or University of Pittsburgh Medical Center system, we now have a DO residency under our umbrella with our Pinnacle residency with the health system there that our system acquired. So I work very closely with their program director, and we've exchanged a lot of dialogue in this regard. So I anticipate this evolving. And the other thing I would just mention, a lot of the DO programs were community hospital programs, not all, but many, other than those that are in high urban areas. And they've essentially been merged, like much of healthcare, into large health systems. And so we have 4 or 5 DO residents rotating our program in our trauma center and peds now in Pittsburgh year round. So I would really look at the dynamic of that. And so we're starting to see a little overlap with applicants. We noticed it last year. So we'll see how that evolves.
Dr. Schroeder?
We're pretty much the same. So we've had DO fellows, no residents. And last year we did have 2 DO sub-Is that rotated with us. And so we certainly look at them with the same scrutiny that we look at every application.
And Dr. Gainey?
So we do rotate DO sub-Is, and we actually do have a PGY2. That is he's our first DO resident. He's doing great.
Good.
So,
awesome. And Dr. Levine?
He's changed everyone's mind about it. So as you imagine, it's always a conversation.
Good. Dr. Levine, how about at Columbia?
Yeah, I've hired 2 DO faculty in the last 3 years. Have not had a DO resident because frankly, we haven't had that many applicants, but now that there's a common pathway, we're fully expecting that to be a bigger pathway this year. Hey guys, I want to ask a question. This is really it's a tough one. You know, most of the schools have elected to eliminate 3rd-year grades this year because of COVID, and Columbia is actually contemplating eliminating them forever. They've already pushed AOA to 4th year. So we're now into the participation trophy segment of the webinar. where it will be harder and harder to differentiate all these students that we said we were differentiating. So how's that going to impact AOA, third year grades? If you don't have those to look at, what features are you guys going to look at to try to help discern these students? I asked a very easy question.
I'll at least kick it off. And I'll say this just from as a person who works intimately with the deans, with the students, and also with the program directors, even though I'm not, technically a program director. The reality is that this is, what we're experiencing now is sort of foreshadowing for when step one, in my humble opinion, goes to pass fail. And so we are really having to change. We really have to change how we evaluate our students and what sort of things we set as priority. And that is no easy task. And I know lots of this sort of this aspect of things has been brought up in Twitter and Instagram, whatever, multiple times. But I want everyone to know that this is something that's ongoing. It's an ongoing conversation. So with that in mind, and before I pass it off to Dr. Hogan, I'll say that, at least in my mind, this is where you need to emphasize your experiences, right? It doesn't have to be all ortho. It doesn't have to be all research. You don't have to have gone off and built an orphanage somewhere, but doing things that you are passionate about, that demonstrate your commitment to something that you really like, that is what many of us are looking for, many of us are advising to in terms of those who can be successful. People, the experience, the grit, the resolve, all these different types of things, how your life and your experience has shaped you, those are things we want to see. And I think that will be that much more important moving forward. It is not just about the grades. It's not just about the scores. It's not just about quote unquote 10, first author publications I get asked about all the time. No, it is about how you sell your vision of your interest in whatever the specialty is, whether it's orthopedics or otherwise. But Dr. Hogan, I'll let you answer as a program director.
It's going to push toward more and more toward relationships. And I think it's well mentioned what Tab mentioned. You see this transition happening. It's going to be an evolution to where some will say, okay, when everyone is special, no one is. However, Legoland was a pretty good movie, so everybody was happy. So I really think, all jokes aside, you really have to start focusing on how do you develop relationships. And those relationships would be critical. When I was applying it was a while ago now, but I'm not that old. Essentially, right? I had 37 I had 37 programs I applied to. Some people told me I would never match coming from Howard Med. I said, well, there are not any additional programs I want to apply to. I applied to 34, 3 that year I added after Katrina because we were the Katrina year. I went on 11 interviews and I'm doing just fine. You did that again now, everyone will all of a sudden say, oh my God, this guy is an anomaly. But what we're trying to tell you is it's really about developing relationships. And I see that, and those relationships from your first year of medical school through those clerkships, someone's still going to have to comment on you, regardless of whether you have a grade or not. Someone's going to still have to be able to say, you know what, this is an individual who I think would be a great physician, will actually be a great partner, be a great peer, be a great colleague, and actually do a great service to medicine. And so if you are unable to establish those relationships, I think you're going to see over time, it becomes harder and harder for those individuals. But med schools will give them help, but it will become harder and harder to really rise above. So that's my perspective.
I'd just like to say that some of my most outstanding residents of all time neither rotated with us nor were Columbia medical students. And if we only took our own, and if we only took our rotators, while we would be comfortable, we would be losing out on some phenomenal applicants out there. And don't forget that, so when you get freaked out that this is all topsy-turvy, remember, after your 3 places that you're going to tell, that's where I was going to do my aways and my home rotation, those 4, then you're going to apply to whatever number you apply to and get whatever number of interviews you're going to get, no different than any other year. And you're going to be reviewed and analyzed no different than any other year, other than is what you're hearing from this esteemed faculty is get to know the people that are going to advocate for you. You need to be proactive. We've said that for 5 webinars. We'll say it again. Proactive. You got to be your best cheerleader this year. and get those people on your bus, because they got to be able to help you, help yourself get a residency spot.
That actually brings up a really, I want to ask Dr. Laporte, Dr. Gainey, Dr. Schroeder this question. How important are the phone calls that you get or emails that you get about students? Because, for instance, I have heard recently of a student this past year who had step 1, 270, didn't match after applying. It was told 30 programs. My humble suggestion was that that person's mentor individual probably did not advocate enough on that person's behalf, regardless of their step score. So how important is this advocacy, emails, phone calls, text messages, Snapchats, whatever it may be, to or TikToks, for you all in terms of helping to cultivate that interview list or rank list? Dr. Laporte, you can go first.
I'll jump on that. So in past years, I think we did very little of that, but whenever we would get a phone call, it really matters a lot. And I think this year, it really will be important pre-interview. So not after the interview, not to be selected, but to be selected for the interview. So you're, again, if you have a handful of 3 programs that you really think would be great for you, that you're going to thrive at, your best advocate should reach out on your behalf, because it'll matter when I get those calls, and I think it'll matter for our students when we make those calls.
Dr. Schroeder?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing that Don did, but I really think that we try and make a no contact policy after interview day, but it's as like having reached out for my own students and have received emails from faculty here or other faculty. It means a lot when it's a personal statement coming from somebody who who you respect, and you trust their judgment. That adds a lot to the whole picture of the student.
And Dr. Gainey?
So I completely agree. I mean, the thing you have to remember is that nobody's going to write you a bad letter of recommendation, or you wouldn't ask them to write it for you. But what somebody says personally, they're going to tell you the truth, especially if it's someone that you know. So that is very meaningful. And I think it's important that everyone be, what Dr. Laporte said, 2, 3 or 4 programs max. Please don't ask them to reach out to 20 programs, because then, we start going right down that path of, who to trust. So, it's a small world. Stick to your the places you really want to go. And I think that's very meaningful.
Those are all excellent points. And, we're kind of nearing the end here. It's almost 9 o'clock, but I want to ask each of you, and we'll start with Dr. Hogan, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give students right now? Top thing that you would want to share for this cycle in particular as a program director?
You can't afford to be on an island. You really are going to have to engage across the gambit with faculty and your mentors.
Dr. Laporte?
So I totally agree that you want to engage and network. And then I guess I'll throw in apply smart. Do your research, know what programs you think are going to be best for you. The best program is the program that's best for you, and target it that way.
Dr. Gainey?
I think the biggest thing is, like everyone said, really reach out, let everyone know, what your interests are, and highlight what makes you different.
Dr. Schroeder?
Definitely do your research, know what you're looking for in a program and what you want to get out of it, but also really push your mentors, right? Force them to tell you where you think, like Dr. Levine was saying, on that spectrum of, how do I rank amongst my 5 classmates? And it may not be like you are number 4 of 5, but you want to know, am I in the top tier? Am I in the middle tier? Am I in the bottom tier? And they're, asking that question is probably the most helpful thing that you can get out of your mentor. And
Dr. Levine, what's the biggest piece of advice you can give?
You go next, and then I'm going to finish.
I agree with everything said. And I would also share that, just as much as you all of y'all students are trying to figure things out, so are myself and the esteemed faculty here and across the country. There is no perfect solution here, and it is challenging. And I think the more proactive we can be on both ends to help forge relationships, open discussion, and continue to strive to make change, the better it's going to be for everyone. But just remember, even don't feel like you're on Lonely Island, because there's lots of people around to try to get you, to try to throw you a lifeboat. Because the reality is that even if you don't have a home program, even if you aren't well connected with your own home program department, you've got some people here, you've got myself, you've got Dr. Levine, people who can actually give you some insight and even potentially make some contacts for you, or help develop some relationships for you. So just be mindful of that and be proactive more than anything else, because that's what we're trying to do for you as well.
So I'd just like to finish by saying that the AOA and CORD, the Council of Orthopedic Residency Directors, has gotten together and gotten all 186 programs in the country, all MD, all DO programs, on one document with the program coordinator's email, with their Twitter accounts, with their social media, with their websites. Are they having a virtual rotation? Do they have open houses? Most importantly, what are their interview dates? How many residents do they have in their program, and do they have a research track? I think that's all of the data points. Now, I've just put the address there. It's going to be it's on the AOA CORD site, but it's outside the firewall, so you don't have to be a member to get to it. And be patient. We just went live over the weekend, but we already have about 30 or 40% of the programs have already started to input their data. And we've really asked everybody to work together, especially with respect to the interview dates, to try to see, you guys will be able to see where the conflicts are. And guess what? The programs will be able to see where the conflicts are. So maybe those conflicts will go away in some creative way. So the last thing I'll say is it's been a real pleasure to host these webinars for you. And we hope that you appreciate that we might not have all the answers. We certainly don't, but we're at least helping to shape the questions and help direct you guys to understand that, yes, everybody is in the same boat. We're all in the same, we have all the same handicaps. Everybody does that are out there right now. And the programs are looking to try to fill their spots with who they think kind of are the type of students that have historically been successful residents in their programs. And each of us at these institutions represented tonight look at that differently. Our personalities of our programs are not the same. And Gus Mazzacca, if he were here right now, would be talking trash about Columbia like you can't even believe. So I'll just do it for him. I'll self-deprecate. So Gus, thank you for doing that. But the bottom line is good luck to you all. We wish you nothing but great success, hopefully. Reach out to any of us if you have questions. And mostly, if you're outside of orthopedic surgery, send all your information to Tabs Air, because none of us know anything other than orthopedic surgery.
I just want to say one last thing. Thank you to all the faculty. Instagram @OrthoMentor. Feel free to send messages. You can email me directly, just as Dr. Levine said, tabsire@gmail.com. I'll put it into the chat box. Never hesitate to reach out. I'm always happy to jump on the phone, FaceTime, Zoom, house party, whatever rocks your boat.
And thanks to Chris Cordero from my department for helping us put this together all this time. Good night, everybody.
Good night.